Implement replication. So replication has been around for a while in many database products, SQL Server and Oracle just to name a few. And before some of these newer technologies came out, like database mirroring and always-on availability groups, it was our go-to technology for maintaining synchronized copies of databases. And we used it for a variety of situations. We used it for high availability, disaster recovery, and even load balancing. So that's the nice thing about replication. It's a very diverse technology. It's been around forever, so it's tried, true, it's tested. And in this nugget, we're going to take a look at the different ways that we can use it to accomplish all of those things. So even though there's better ways to do this stuff now with always-on availability groups and database mirroring, it's still good to know because it gives us another option when we're analyzing requirements and trying to come up with a solution. Replication still may be the choice for some of these scenarios. Checking out the nugget overview, we're going to start by getting familiar with all the components and types of replication. So the components, we'll talk about articles, publishers, distributors, subscribers, publications, agents. There's a lot of components involved with replication, so we'll get familiar with them and how they work together. And then we'll talk about the types of replications. The three big major types of replication you have, each that fit a different scenario, are going to be snapshot, transactional, and merge. So we'll talk about them all. And we'll even talk about a fourth one, which is inside of transactional, called peer-to-peer replication. From there, we'll jump into the virtual Nugget Lab, and I'll show you how to configure distribution. And in our demonstration, we're going to set up a centralized distribution server as opposed to a local distributor, which you can use when you create replication. A lot of the times, people will accept the default and create the distributor on the publisher. So we'll talk about the pros and cons of having a distributor on the publisher versus dedicating a SQL Server instance to distribution. And I'll show you how to set those up over in the virtual Nugget Lab. Then we'll learn how to work with each type of replication. We'll create snapshot publications, we'll create transactional publications, and we'll even create merge publications so you can get a feel of how each type of replication works when it comes to setting it up. Then we'll take a look at how to configure our subscribers and set up subscriptions that can download our publications and synchronize the databases. And at the end here, we'll take a look at how to work with the replication monitor to monitor replication and ensure that it's functioning as it should. Let's start here by talking about the components and the different types of replication. So once we get familiar with the components, we'll talk about the types and which situations they're best suited for. So we have the article. At the heart of replication is the object we want to replicate. An article, the most popular choices for an article are going to be a table, along with its data, of course, stored procedure, a view, a user-defined function. Those are going to be your big items that you're going to want to mark for replication, in which they'll get sent from our publishers to our subscribers when anything changes within them. We also have a publication, and a publication is really just a collection of articles, and that's the physical object that we're going to be working with in SQL Server. We're going to create a publication, we're going to specify what articles are in that publication, and then when we set up subscribers on our destination servers, they're going to subscribe to a publication. A publisher is the server that contains publications. So when we enable a server for publishing and we create some publications on it, our subscribers will be able to use the publisher and the publications on that server to receive data. And that's all a subscriber is. We create subscriptions on the subscriber that can then subscribe to these publications that will either get pushed or pulled to their local copy of the database. The distributor is the server that contains the distribution database. The distribution database just contains all of the changes and tracks all the subscribers. So it has all the information, all the metadata that it needs for the data and for the subscribers and where to put it. So that's kind of our control database for replication. And then we have agents, and there are a lot of different agents. There's, for instance, the distribution agent, which is its job is to simply take the data that's stored in the distribution database, data and objects and otherwise, all the change stuff, and push it out to the subscribers. There's also a log reader agent, where in transactional replication, the log reader agent monitors all the transaction logs on all the participating databases, and then moves those changes into the distribution database. There's also a snapshot agent, there's a merge agent, so there's a lot of different agents, some of which that work with their specific type of replication, some of it to work with some of the replication components themselves. And these agents by default are actually SQL Server jobs. And when we set up replication, we use the wizard to set up our specific type of replication. We'll have to configure the agent to run at specified intervals, to run on demand, and it's all going to depend on the type of replication we use and the environment, the network topology we're working with. So how this works now is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a publication. After we create and set up a distributor and after we enable our SQL Server instance for publishing, we're going to set up a publication, which is going to contain a few articles. And let's take tables, for instance. So if we create a publication that has a couple of tables in it, we need to specify what type of replication this publication is based on. So let's start with snapshot. Snapshot, as the name implies, takes a picture of data at the moment in time. So what that means is we're going to have latency between our publishers and our subscribers, because we're not going to be taking snapshots every couple of minutes, right? That would be just crazy because snapshots, when they occur, actually put a lock on the table itself. So you don't want to be running snapshots often. You want snapshots to run very infrequently. So because of that, you're going to create snapshots on tables and objects that don't change very often, or even ones that are small. And a good example there would be like a product list. Maybe you get new products in once a week or maybe even once a month. Then you can set up your snapshot replication to run once a week or once a month, and subscribers will get the updates with the minimal latency being a week or a month. Now, one thing to note about snapshot replication is that all the other forms of replication, even snapshot replication itself, uses a snapshot to initialize the database. So we need to be in a synchronized state before we use our specific kind of replication. So you'll see that whenever we set up transactional merge or peer-to-peer replication, that it's going to require a snapshot to initialize. We also have transactional replication, and this is going to be that replication that only tracks the changes. And these are going to be good for those server-to-server environments where you want to keep a synchronized copy of your database around for high availability, for disaster recovery, or even for load balancing purposes. So how this would work is, let's say that we have a publisher. And on our publisher, we create a publication out of a couple of tables here in our database, and then we create some subscribers. Now, with standard transactional replication, it's one way. Anything that happens on the publisher gets pushed over to your subscribers. Now, there is another form of transactional replication called peer-to-peer transactional replication. And what that does is it takes our one-way street here, where everything that happens on the publisher gets pushed out to the subscribers, and turns it into a two-way street, bidirectional replication. So things that happen on the subscriber can now also be pushed back to the publisher. Now, with peer-to-peer replication, as well as merge replication, which we'll get to in a second, there's the potential for conflicts. And what that means is if the same record is updated in multiple locations, when a synchronization occurs, who wins? And with peer-to-peer replication, we only have conflict detection. There's no good way to do conflict resolution. Merge replication is built for conflict resolution. There's a lot of different ways we can do it, and we can even customize it to our own requirements. So the trick with peer-to-peer replication is to avoid conflicts entirely. And the way that you do that is through data partitioning. And as an example, let's say we have a server in North America, one in South America, one in Europe. What we could do is make sure that any updates that occur only occur on their slice of data. So we're doing data locality here. That's just one way to do it. But with peer-to-peer replication, I've actually seen people use merge replication in server-to-server environments instead of peer-to-peer, just because of the conflict resolution features that we have in merge replication. So just know, though, that peer-to-peer replication is built for those server-to-server environments and does not have good conflict resolution, does have conflict detection, but the best way to do it is to avoid conflicts entirely by data partitioning. Finally, we have merge replication, and this is going to be good for those environments where you have remote users, traveling salespeople that still need to work with the data, but may not have a constant connection to our network. So what will happen is when they're offline, they will be making changes locally. Those changes will be tracked, and when they do eventually get a connection into our world, their changes will be uploaded. And then anything that's also changed on the publisher will also get downloaded, because we may have our internal network people working on that same data. Not to mention, everybody will be syncing at different times, various locations. So there'll be a lot of uploading and downloading of data going on. So you can see why merge replication requires such a robust conflict detection and resolution system. And while you won't need to know how to do conflict resolution or even detection in the exam, it's good to know that with merge, there's a lot of ways to do it. There's built-in resolvers for doing it based on priority, doing it based on time, and then there's also ways that you can write your own custom resolvers and add your own business logic. All right, why don't we head over to the Virtual Nugget Lab and learn how to implement replication. In the Virtual Nugget Lab, I have Management Studio ready to go, so let's bring it to the forefront. I also have a connection to each one of our instances installed locally here on our Nugget Lab server. So we're going to use all 4 instances in this Nugget. I also have a project called 22-replication with a single script we'll use for transactional replication. And what I want to start with here is how to set up a distribution server. Now, more often than not, when people create their publications, the publisher, that server that they're creating the publication on, is also set up as the distributor. So that's known as the local distributor. And while that's going to be fine for a lot of cases and for one-offs, sometimes, especially if you use replication a lot, you could really be creating a bottleneck on the server that contains the database, so on your publisher. So if that's the case, you may want to take your distributor and put it on its own SQL instance. So that way you take all the burden off your publishers, and they'll all be storing their data in a nice centralized location. The only downfall of that, of course, is now you have a single point of failure for your distributor. So let's make eval2 our distributor and set up the distribution database. So let's expand our instance, and we'll right-click on replication and choose configure distribution. This will fire up the distribution wizard. We can choose next here. Here we're going to ensure that eval2 is going to be the distributor. So it'll create the distribution database in the log file here on eval2. So we'll choose next. Here is our snapshot folder. So whenever anything needs a snapshot to synchronize, or if we use snapshot replication, we want to put it inside of this folder. And you want this to be a network share, because you'll notice here, this little warning down here is telling us that we won't be able to support pull subscription. So if we want to support both push and pull, we need a network folder. And what I did is I made a share on this machine, SQL Nugget Lab, called REPL Data, which is actually right inside of here. Here's our share REPL Data inside of our 22-replication folder in our support files directory. So looks good there. We'll choose next. Now we can specify the name of our distribution database. Here is the MDF file, the LDF file. Looks good. We'll leave the default locations. We can choose next. And here is where we can add publishers. So if we wanted to, we could add other publishers that are pointed to this database. So let's say that our publisher in this case is going to be our eval instance. So we'll hit that, and it's going to point to this distribution database. Now, because this isn't going to be a publisher eval2, we can actually uncheck that. There we go. So if we had any other publishers, if we were going to publish data from any other instances, we could put them in here and point them to our distribution database. So we'll hit next, and now we need to specify a password here at the distributor. So what happens is when we create publishers that use this distributor, we're going to need to supply that password so they have access to using this distributor. So I'll just put a password in here for the distributor, and we're good. We'll hit next. And now we can generate a script as well as configure distribution. If we hit next, we'll get a summary of everything we just specified. Once we hit finish, it'll do so. And we're good to go. Not too bad, right? Now if we head into databases on our eval2 instance and expand system databases, and we need to refresh this, you will see our distribution database. So notice that comes in as a system database. Now, if you need to do any sort of reconfiguring of the distributor, just right-click on your replication node, head into distributor properties, and here you get a list of the databases, the distribution databases installed on this server. You can have more than one. Why would you want to do that? Well, if you have many instances that are publishing and using this as a distributor, then that single distribution database may become a bottleneck. So what you can do is you can click New, add more distribution databases. And a good strategy here is if you do have many instances, make a distribution database per instance and then tie those publishers to their specific distribution database. You also have the transaction retention period here, and then the history retention period. If you click on New, you can see a little bit more about this. The history retention is just replication performance history. Transaction retention period is how long the distribution database is going to store that staged publication changes that happen from transactional replication. So really the trick here is to make sure that your subscriptions are synchronizing with their publishers within this time frame, with the default being 72 hours, because if they don't, their subscriptions will become deactivated, in which case we would need to manually intervene, resynchronize those databases with a snapshot, and get them back on track for transactional replication. So just make sure you understand how often your clients are connecting, and if it's not often enough, you may need to bump this number up. Also here with the distributor properties, you can go into publishers and add or remove publishers that point to your specific databases. So here's where you would add an instance and then add distribution 1 and add another instance distribution 2, that sort of thing. And you can name your distribution databases whatever you want as well. You can also alter the password that publishers are going to use connect in. So that's how you can configure a distributor. Let's take a look at how to configure a publisher. So we're going to do this on our eval instance. So let's expand it, head down to the replication node, right-click on local publications. You can see we have none right now. We'll right-click, choose new publication, and this will launch us into the new publication wizard. So let's hit next on the main screen. First thing we need to do is specify our distributor. Are we going to use a local distributor, meaning our eval instance will do both the publishing and the distribution, or do we want to specify an actual distributor? And we do because we just set one up. So let's hit add here. Let's point to our eval2 instance, connect, and there we go. So eval2 is going to be our distributor. Now if we hit next, we will have to supply the password. So let's type the password in here. There we go. Once we hit next, now we choose the database here on our publisher, on our eval instance. So let's take our AdventureWorks 2012 database. Once we do that, we need to specify the type of replication we want to do. Do we want a snapshot publication, transactional, peer-to-peer, or merge? Let's keep this one simple. We'll do snapshot publication and hit next. Now we need to choose the articles we want inside of this publication. Anything from tables, stored procedures, views, index views, to user-defined functions. So let's expand tables. And what would be a good table here for snapshot replication? Something that doesn't change very often, maybe once a week or once a month. How about the product table? That sounds good. So we can put a check here next to the product table. And in fact, if you expand it, you can even go down to the column level. So if you only want to synchronize specific columns, then you can uncheck the ones that you do not want to synchronize. Pretty handy there. Also, if you have multiple tables, you can drop this articles down and say, I want to set the properties of all these tables, or you can set the property of the currently highlighted table. We're only going to put one table in this publication to keep it simple. So let's just set the properties here of this specific table. And here you can choose what you want to copy over to the subscriber, so you can get pretty granular about what you want to send over there. Everything from indexes to triggers to check constraints, you name it, it's in there. And then how you want your destination object to behave, and then just some other information here regarding identity. So this looks good. Let's hit cancel, and we'll hit next. Here's where you can add filters. So if you only want to publish a specific subset of data, you can hit add here, and given our product table, we can write a query and put a where clause here against a specific column. So that's a way to partition data. We can hit next here, and here's where we can configure the snapshot agent. So when do we want to create the snapshot? We can do it immediately. If we do so, the snapshot agent will take a picture of the data right after we're done with the wizard and put it into that network share that we specified when we set up the distributor, and then it can use that to initialize and work with subscriptions. That's the data that it will apply then on our subscribers. Keep in mind, though, doing this during the middle of a day on a large table may be a bad idea because, again, the snapshot agent will put a table lock on the table when it's taking that picture of data. Obviously, we can do this now because we're not in a production environment, so we'll leave that on. And then you can also schedule the snapshot agent to run at the following times. Something you'll want to do, again, if you have a large table that changes maybe once a month, then you may want to schedule this, the snapshot agent to run once a month to refresh that data to keep your snapshots up to date. So we're good here. Let's go ahead and uncheck scheduling the snapshot agent and hit next. Now we also need to specify security for the snapshot agent when it runs. How is it going to connect to the publishers, and what kind of security is it going to use? Well, we can specify a specific account here, or we can use the not so recommended security best practice and run under the SQL Server agent account. I actually altered all of our agent accounts to run under the Nugget user account, which is a local administrator, so we won't run into any security issues. Fine for demonstration purposes. And then also when the snapshot agent connects to the publisher to get the data, how is it going to do it? It's going to impersonate that same account that we just specified. So we're good here with security. We can hit next. The last part of the wizard is, do we want to create the publication right now? We do, so we'll hit next. And now we can get just an overview here, and we can also specify a name. So let's call this our products snapshot. Once we hit finish, it will create it, start the snapshot agent, and now underneath local publications, we have a snapshot publication. Now, if we right click on this and head into properties, you can alter pretty much everything we just looked at. One thing I do want to point out though is the other side of subscriptions expiration or becoming deactivated is inside of publications. By default, they'll never expire from this point, but they can be deactivated until they are reinitialized. And that's the transaction retention period we looked over on the distributor. So this is how they can be deactivated. The other switch here is you can expire them and even drop them if they're not synchronized within 336 hours. So this will be controlled from the publication, where this is controlled from the distributor. You can also alter your articles if you would like to do so here. Also alter their properties. Add a filter. Here's exactly what we specified for our snapshot. And you can see it picked up the default folder that we specified in the distributor, which is the REPL data share that we made. In fact, if we head down to our support files folder and head into replication, whoop, that's not replication, head into replication, REPL data. It's going to create a couple of folders in here. And here it is. Here is our product table that we just created. Check that out. And by the way, Snapshot Agent uses BCP, the bulk copy program we looked at in a previous nugget, to do all this data, to take the data out of the publisher and copy it into this file. So pretty neat there. All right, now, if we head back into here, you can also FTP your snapshot, which is kind of cool. You have some subscription options in here. You have your publication access list, and then again your agent security. So pretty much all the properties we looked at during the wizard, just a couple of extra ones in there to work with. All right, let me show you how to set up transactional replication by creating a transactional publication. So let's right-click on local publications, choose new publication. Same thing, we'll choose next. We want to work with the AdventureWorks 2012 database. This time instead of snapshot, we want to choose transactional. So we'll do that. We'll hit next. Now we need to choose our articles. And you know what? Before we even do this, let's head into transactional test here, and let's create a table called replication test. It's going to have two columns in it, ID and some data. ID is just going to be an identity column. Some data will contain random unique identifiers. We're going to insert the default values into this replication test. Go 1000 will execute this batch 1000 times. So we'll get 1000 rows of data. So let's just hit execute. That'll create the table, insert 1000 rows, and we're good to go. Now let's flip back to our wizard, head into tables, and let's choose replication test here. There it is, as our article. Then we'll choose next. We could, again, work with filtering. Choose next. Now we need to specify our snapshot. This is a brand new publication, so how our subscription is going to get initialized. Let's do the same thing. Create the snapshot immediately. Hit next. And now we need to specify our agent security, not only for our snapshot agent, but also for our log reader agent. Again, this is the agent that's going to run through the databases, or the database in this case, to track all the changes. It's going to read the transaction log, track all the changes, and send them in to the staging area, which is our distribution database. So let's hit security settings. Let's do the same thing here. And then you'll notice this tick means that it'll run the log reader agent under the same security count as the snapshot. You can override that and choose different ones if you wish. Let's choose next. Same thing at the end of the wizard, create the publication, and now we can give it a name. Let's call this replication test, and this is transactional. And also notice we didn't have to specify a distributor there because we already did that. This instance is now pointed at all the publications will by default be pointing at the distributor on eval2. So we're good there. Now let's hit finish, and that is going to do the same thing. Create the publication, add the article, start the snapshot agent, and we're good. Now before we create subscriptions, let's do our last type of publication here, which is going to be merge replication. So we'll right click, choose new publication, walk through the wizard one more time, only this time we'll choose merge publication. We'll hit next. Here is where we're going to specify the lowest common denominator of SQL Server functionality. So you're going to have clients out there with laptops that are going to have SQL Server installed to host their local copy of the database. So make sure you choose the lowest common denominator as far as what those installations may be. For this demo, we'll just choose SQL Server 2008 and we'll hit next. Now we can choose what articles we want to work with. And for merge replication, especially if we have, again, traveling salespeople, they're probably going to be working with things like customers, right? Or maybe sales orders and things of that nature. So let's just choose our customers table here. And we can choose next. Once again, filtering, we'll just bypass that. Here is, once again, our snapshot agent. And something interesting you'll notice in this wizard, as opposed to our snapshot and our transactional wizard, is that it sets up defaults and even says we should create a snapshot every 14 days to initialize on. And the reason it does this is because, again, we're dealing with merge replication. Our clients may not always be disconnected, and we may have someone that goes on vacation for 2 weeks that never syncs and may get deactivated. So that's why they're recommending that we keep our snapshots fresh. That way, clients that do eventually connect after a long period off or haven't synchronized in a while can get we'll have a fresh snapshot available for us to get them back up and running. So we'll leave the defaults here and choose next. Once again, we need to choose our security here for snapshot, so we'll do that. We'll choose next, create the publication, and now we can give it a name. Let's just call this customers merge. We'll hit finish. That'll create our merge publication, and now we have our three major types of replication set up as publications. Now, I didn't go through the properties of our transactional publication because they're virtually the same as snapshot. But I do want to go through the properties of merge because they're a little bit different. So if we right-click on our merge publication, you'll see we even have more options in the menu here. We have view conflicts. We got a little conflict viewer. And you can also configure web synchronization, which is a way that we can allow our subscriptions to synchronize to this publication using a web server. Now let's head down to properties. And inside of properties, the big thing I want to show you here is on articles. If you right click on an article, you can set your synchronization direction when it comes to merge replication. So bidirectional is the default, meaning both ways. You can also override that if you wanted to only go one way for this specific publication, then you can do it and choose which one way you would like to go. Also in the article properties is where you can choose your resolver. Those are really the big differences here with merge publications. All right, so let's set up subscriptions. And let's do it on both eval3 and our SQL Express instance. So let's expand eval3. Let's head into replication. Let's right click on subscription and choose new subscription. So this time we're going to choose next, and we need to specify what publication. So let's choose what server. We can find a SQL Server publisher or even an Oracle publisher, which, by the way, is going away in the future. So that's why I haven't really mentioned it at all. But in the past, you can connect to Oracle publications from SQL Server. So let's hit find this, and we want to find a publication on our eval instance, so we'll do so. Now we choose what will we like to subscribe to. So let's start with transactional. I'll give you an idea here, and we'll run some tests on our transactional publication. So we'll choose our transactional one first. We'll hit next. And now what do we want to do? Do we want to do a push subscription where the distributor is going to push us these changes, or do we want to do a pull? Now for transactional, we'll want to do a push. For merge, we'll want to do a pull. And the reason we want to do a pull for merge is because, again, those traveling salespeople, we don't know when they're going to connect. So we want to give them the responsibility that when they connect, they can pull their subscriptions down. So transactional, definitely push subscription here. So let's choose next. And now here on our destination, in our eval3 instance, what is our subscription database going to be? And we're going to choose our AdventureWorks 2012 database, which I have set up here on our eval3. We can also add another subscriber. Let's do it. Let's add another subscriber. This time we're going to add it to our Express instance. Same thing. So it's kind of nice that you can set up all your subscribers in one shot here. So we have an eval3 and our SQL Express are both going to be subscribers, pulling data from that replication test into the AdventureWorks database on both their instances. Which, by the way, they currently do not have that replication test table and all that data. They only have the AdventureWorks prior to us doing that. So let's hit next here. And now we need to specify how they're going to connect, how they're going to connect to the distributor and how they're going to connect to the subscriber. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to run it under the SQL Server agent account. We're going to impersonate it when it's connecting to the distributor, and when it's connecting to the subscriber, we'll do the same thing. So we'll hit OK. And we'll do the same thing for our Express instance. So everything looks good there security-wise. Now we can hit Next. So this is how we're going to define how often we synchronize, how often our subscriptions get their changes from our publications through the distributor. So run continuously is basically telling us real time. Otherwise, we can run on demand only, which is manual, or we can define a schedule when to do so. So we're going to leave those at run continuously. So we'll leave these are real-time subscriptions. We can choose next, and now we need to define when we want to initialize our subscription. If we even want to initialize, we do. We can say immediately or at first synchronization. So if you do that, it may take a little bit the first time it synchronizes, the subscription synchronizes with the publication. It may take a little bit. So let's choose immediately there as well. We'll choose next, and now we're at the end of the wizard. So we're going to create the subscription. Here we have an overview of both subscriptions on both of our instances. Once we have finished, it's going to create those subscriptions on both of those instances. And there we go, successful. So now we can look at the local subscriptions on our eval and Express instance, but also something that's really cool is on our actual publisher. If we expand that publication, check it out, we have them both under here, so we can centrally manage those subscriptions underneath the publication. Now, something useful I want to show you about these subscriptions, if you right-click on one of them, let's take our Express subscription, for instance, and head into View Synchronization Status. You can just get a brief overview here. And it'll tell us synchronization is in progress, but it's always in progress with transactional replication because we set it to run continuously. But what's really useful here is if you hit monitor, it'll launch us right in to our replication monitor. And I'll show you another way to get into here. But really what you can do is expand this, go into your specific publication. You can get some performance metrics here on the first screen. We can see performance is excellent. We have no latency going on, so everything looks nice here. But what's really handy about this is if you head into agents, here is our snapshot agent. So you see it only took a second to apply the snapshot. Not bad. And why is that? Well, let's double click on it. It'll take us into the history of exactly what it did. And we can see that it took our replication test table over there and added all the data into it. So pretty cool. We get some really nice detailed history regarding all of our synchronizations happen. So this is a great monitor that you'll definitely use if you use replication because it gives us insight to exactly how replication worked. And you can also see our log reader agent. You can see the same thing. And nothing's happened with our log reader agent yet because we haven't done anything. We haven't done anything on the publisher that would warrant the log reader agent moving things into the distributor and the distributor then moving it all out to our subscriptions. So I'm going to leave this replication monitor running and just minimize it. We'll close out of our synchronization status for that subscription. So while we're connected to our eval instance, our publisher, let's add another 1,000 rows into our replication test table here on the publisher. So if we hit execute, that'll do it. And while that's executing, let's head over here to our replication monitor and check that out. It's sending them over to the subscribers as we speak. Pretty cool, huh? So that's where this replication manager is just an awesome tool because we can watch replication happen. But we can see now that our transactional replication is working as intended. We do something on the publisher, it's getting pushed out to the subscribers as soon as it happens. Now, the last thing I want to show you is how to create a subscription to a merge publication because it's a little bit different towards the end of the wizard. And by the way, you can create these subscriptions from your publication server itself. So rather than connecting like we did down here and heading to the replication node to create them, you can just right-click on your publication, choose New Subscription. So here we'll hit Next. We want to choose our Merge publication. We'll choose Next. Here we want to choose Pull Subscriptions because, again, with Merge replication, you may have offsite clients. Whenever they connect, they're going to want to pull their subscriptions down. So we'll choose that and hit Next. And here is where our subscribers are going to be. So let's add a subscriber, and let's just do our Express instance. We could add another one and add, again, our Eval3 instance if we would like to, but let's just choose Express for now and hit Next. Here we can specify those credentials for connecting. We're just going to impersonate once again. We'll choose Next. Here is our synchronization schedule, which we can't alter anything because it's with merge replication, it's going to run on demand only because we chose pull subscriptions. So we'll hit Next. Synchronization, same thing. It's going to automatically default here to at first synchronization. So we'll hit Next. And here's where it's a little bit different. Our type of subscription. What type of subscription to our merge publication is this? A client? And this is the one you'll want to choose for those remote users. And the default conflict resolution priority is going to be first to the publisher win. So whoever puts the data in first is the one that's going to win. Also, you can specify server. And if you do this and you have conflicts at the server level, then you can specify the priority for this subscription. All right, so let's choose client here and choose Next. We're at the end of the wizard, so we'll choose Next here. Same thing, just a brief overview. Once we hit Finish, it'll create the subscription to our merge publication. We hit Close, we can expand it, and there it is. So now we have a bidirectional merge subscription set up against our customers table, which means we could go into our Express instance in the AdventureWorks database, modify some data in the customers table, and it would get retransmitted back up here to the publisher when we synchronized. And again, we did all that on demand, so we would need to do that on our own. And in fact, if you go into the replication monitor and you head up here to customers merge, you'll see that we have an uninitialized subscription because we have yet to connect. Now, you can do that on your own. You can head into SQL Server Agent, start the job, or just like we did up here, you can view your synchronization status and start the job manually on your subscriptions. So that's how you would do that. And another note on monitoring, if you do want to launch the replication monitor from outside, you can just right-click on your replication node and choose Launch Replication Monitor. That'll fire us right into the same monitor that we can then use to check out all our agents, what they're doing, view the history, view everything about all the subscriptions that are associated with all our publications. And again, just a wonderful tool here for troubleshooting and just knowing what's going on with replication in all of our publications and subscriptions. In this CBT Nugget, we learned how to implement replication. We started off by talking about the different components and types of replication. We got familiar with articles, publications, publishers, distributors, subscribers, and even agents. And then we got familiar with those types of replication. Talked about snapshot replication, transactional replication, even briefly talked about peer-to-peer transactional replication, and then merge replication. Then we jumped into the virtual Nugget Lab and learned how to create a publication based on each type of replication: snapshot, transactional, and merge. We then got familiar with how to create a subscription to transactional and merge replication, and even got familiar with how to use the replication monitor. I hope this has been informative for you, and I thank you for viewing.